було, то я думаю, що вона працею забезпечена. Но в той час писала ще інша журналістка про ту предосторогу, яка працювала на Чорнобилі, то про ту я знаю краще, це Людмила Тараненко. Вона виступала в нас і на мітингах, вже ті чорнобильські дні. Вона також, її були усунули з роботи, її там чуть до лікарні не запхали, але ж, однак, це її не зломило. Вона і далі працювала поруч з меморіалом, поруч із Народним рухом, Зеленим світом. І зараз вона знаходиться в Черкасах і також працює по профілю. За Ковалевську в даний момент я не знаю як, бо вона так пізніші часи до нас так щільно не примикала до нашої гармати.
Але думаєте, що вона ще живе?
Я не можу вам сказати. Не можу, затверджувати не можу. Но якби щось таке сталося, то я б знала би, що якби щось таке сталося, то нам би було відомо про те, що з нею щось таке сталося. А у вас є якісь інші дані, може?
Власне, що тут ми пробували шукати за нею, довідатися що-небудь. Тому що дана особа, яка відразу збагнула, що це може бути така аварія, то дуже цікаве, що з нею сталося, бо чомусь нічого ані в газетах немає, ані ніде ми не чули, то варто цікаво б якось розвідати.
Так, я це зроблю, тільки повернусь до Києва, я вам це зроблю і ті дані вам
Дуже вам
передам.
Дякую. Що би ви ще хотіли сказати для нашої діаспори взагалі, будь ласка, якщо ваша ласка щось, ваші свої?
Для нашої діаспори я хочу, по-перше, за все передати величезну подяку в тому зрушенні, яке має в даний момент і в даний час наша Україна. Бо всі ті ідеї, всю ту нашу історію, яку ми зараз знаємо, яку ми передаємо нашій молоді, все це ми отримали від нашої діаспори. І не було би нашої діаспори, не дай Господь, то невідомо, як би сталося і як би було зараз на Україні. Адже в нас були, як в того Кирила, правда, вони ростуть у нас, були всіх відрізані крила, кого вони росли, але ж той ґрунт, ту живу воду ми мали звідки отримати, бо ми прекрасно знали, що в діаспорі живе самосвідома частина нашої України. Бо кругом по чужим землям всіх справжніх українців, ті, що любили, ті, що знали, ті, що хотіли, ті, що боролися, були за межами України. Як не на Соловках, як не по Сибірах, то десь, слава Богу, збереглися. То я за то дуже вдячна. І то тепер я вже зрозуміла, що воно в нас, діаспора була для нас каталізатором свого боку. А коли в нас почалося то ми також уже, то такий замкнене коло, ми вже ніби вся Україна є. Ви на нас, а ми якось на вас. І я відчуваю, що ми якось, може, то я і неправильно відчуваю, але я якось так інтуїтивно відчуваю, що і ми діаспору нашу згуртовуємо. Може, це не так? І всі робимо одну спільну справу. Отож, моя найбільша подяка нашій діаспорі. І таке бажання, щоб вони не скидали зброю, а, так би мовити, чистили її, зачищали. Ну, я не в буквальному плані того слова, а мається на увазі свої бажання, свої ідеї, свої, ну, всі ті складові частини, якими ми боремося, ми відчуваємо, що це треба нам спільно робити і рятувати Україну. І я дуже ще рада того, що все-таки в нас є діаспора, бо якщо ми згинемо як нація, то в нас є чисте зерно на розсаду по світах. І воно пробуджується генетично навіть там нас, на тих перемор'ях, де вже українці, то в нас зараз, мабуть, Богом дане, таке, що наш народ пробуджується, відроджується. Українці, що вже там століттями жили, в них тільки поїхали наші люди туди, бо ми засилаємо по ті Мордовії, по ті Воркути, пенсіонерів і так далі. Люди, в нас є багато свідомих людей, старших. І вони просто мають більше часу, вони їздять взимку, осінь, весною, коли ще там можна їздити. І їздять по громадах, вони не знають там мови. От приїхали в Примор'я, там зайшли в школу. Дивляться прізвища, Петренки, Іваненки, Дмитренки, такі прізвища. Вони всі ті діти записані росіянами. Звичайно, ніхто запитали в класі, чи можна зайти, можна. Питають діти, хто хоче вчити українську мову. Всі підняли руки, що вони хочуть вчити українську мову. Записані росіянами. Питають, вдома тато, мама знає, ніхто не знає. Дід, баба не знає. Вже в них кілька поколінь, ніхто мови не знає. А один хлопчик піднімає руки, каже, а я знаю українську мову. А звідки ти знаєш? Хто вдома говорить? Та ніхто. Я вивчив мову по Радіо Свободі. О, так це щось говорить про те, що в нас якесь таке, навіть в тому місці, де так все знищено, я вважаю, що то Бог до нас повернувся, Бог нас любить. Так як в нас зараз воно йде все. Ті зрушення, що ми маємо зараз в Україні, звичайно, ми хотіли, щоб вони були ще кращі, але ж ми думали, що вони будуть через роки. А воно так вийшло, опередило трошки наші побажання, це дуже добре. Нам тільки зрушити ту східні області і не дати можливості, щоб не було, не дати їм можливості, щоб вони нам ввели військовий стан. Оце нам виграти якось час. Треба дати можливість, щоб ті республіки скоріш відкололися, відколювалися, нам буде легше, бо нам важче, чим любі республіці ті імперії. Тому що ми багатонаціональні, наша земля була поділена Сходом і Заходом, і східні області дуже знищені. Нас зараз хочуть роз'єднати на кілька, так би мовити, малоросів відділити якихось, і ще якихось. Нам дуже важко в тому плані. А ми хочемо, щоб в нас була Україна одна, бо вона в нас одна, і нам її треба рятувати всім разом. То я ще раз дякую нашу діаспору за ту допомогу, яку нам надають всіх напрямках.
Дуже вам
Я вам дуже багато, вибачте, що за таку балачку, бо то просто балачка. Я думала підготувати.
З нами Бог.
Так,
поборемо.
Хай Бог
Хай
безумовно.
Бог допомагає і
вам...
так всюди так голосіть оцю єдність. Бо в дійсності таких ми знаємо, що це ця єдність.
Це саме головне.
Це найголовніше, власне.
Так.
Так, тож дуже щиренько дякую. Хай Бог допомагає.
Дякую вам також.
On November the 30th, 1989, at the Royal Courts of Justice in the Strand, the jury returned their verdict in the biggest libel trial in English legal history. Lord Aldington, who as Brigadier Toby Lowe had served with the British Army during World War II, was awarded £1.5 million in damages.
My feelings are feelings of tremendous relief that my reputation and the name of my family has been fully and wonderfully vindicated by the jury's verdict. And that is a relief such as I have never imagined having. So I'm delighted.
Nikolai Tolstoy had alleged Lord Aldington was a war criminal. Did he now regret it?
Well, perhaps it would have been better to have left everybody in their graves and the story untold. And certainly in this country there are a lot of people who wish that I'd done that. But you can't do what you've got to do what you feel is right.
The libel case was only concerned with the actions of Lord Aldington. What follows is the wider story, and it's a story that begins over 700 miles away. June the 1st, 1990, in a small cemetery at Pigetz near Lienz in southern Austria. A few remaining survivors attend a memorial service for the thousands of men, women and children the British Army handed over to Stalin and Tito in the spring of 1945. Around 30,000 of those the British handed over were sent back against Allied policy and faced torture and death at the hands of Britain's communist allies. All this took place in a part of southern Austria known as Carinthia, a land famous for its beauty. One survivor came 6,000 miles from Australia to attend the memorial service. The sight of Carinthia after 45 years brings him only bleak memories.
There were the lying bodies everywhere, you know, killed. Women, children, old people. And before I left this place, I turned me around to those graves there. I saluted to them, and I said, brothers and sisters, I come back one day, and I did.
Down this same road on May the 8th, 1945, came the forward units of British Five Corps. The armistice that brought the war in Europe to an end had been signed just the day before. Five Corps made their headquarters in the provincial capital of Klagenfurt and held victory celebrations. The fighting was over, and now they felt should come the rewards of peace. The British had just one thought on their minds.
Every British soldier thought, well, now the one thing we got to do is to finish the job and get home. We've been fighting for 6 years. Fought all across North Africa, all up Italy. And they got to Austria and they thought, here's the end of the run. And it wasn't, because there were, I think I'm right in saying, 250,000 refugees from all over the place who had no food, no shelter, no hygiene. And that took a very lot of organization. And the army did it.
In those early days in May, southern Austria was filled with the human debris of the war. Many German forces had been retreating from the Russians, yet more Germans had run from the Bulgarians, and thousands of other German forces were fleeing from Marshal Tito's Yugoslav partisans.
Pressures came from all directions. We had the administrative pressure, we had the political pressure, and we had the physical pressure. We were kept on the go, morning, noon, and night.
One of the biggest administrative problems was posed by the thousands of surrendering forces, troops of all nationalities who had fought on the German side. Chief amongst these were the 42,000 Cossacks. They were men mostly of Russian origin, but some also came from other European countries. In all, several thousand of these Cossacks were not Soviet citizens. The Cossacks had fought together with the Germans on the Eastern Front against Stalin. They'd also fought with the Germans in Yugoslavia against Tito's communist partisans. By the end of the war, some of these Cossacks held technical Waffen-SS status, and all of them had been involved in a brutal conflict with their communist enemies. So they were glad it was the British Army who accepted their surrender, and they readily threw away their weapons.
We watched the Cossacks coming in, and this funny little convoy of sort of little covered wagons, some good states repair, others in a bit of a shambles, all wandering into this camp. The war was over, the sun was shining, and everything was great. I thought, well, thank goodness, this is the end of the line for them. I didn't realize what type of the end of the line it was. What was the end of their line?
Oh, when we saw the British uniform, we were so happy, you know. We start to kiss each other. Mostly of them say, hooray, hooray. You can hear in the evening in the mountains, Cossacks, you know, they are there in the mountains, they sing these songs, you know. And you know, from these mountains coming Siberian Cossacks. But from other mountains coming Don Cossacks or Kuban Cossacks, you know, echo from the mountains. And it was so nice, beautiful. Of course, in the evening it was cold. But you get the songs to the late night, you know. It was very, very happy, you know.
The British took responsibility for the Cossacks and set up camps for them, which became home not just to the Cossacks' own families, but also to some other refugees who had wandered in seeking food and comfort. They found both at the hands of the British.
Everybody in the camp were delighted with the sight of the British. Those who stayed there, they didn't even want to go towards the American camps, I can assure you. They wanted to remain with British because they thought they had tremendous justice. And unlike other nations, they believe in British justice.
I really love the British people because I was brought up in the British literature and I knew the histories, and my mother and myself, we have all those books of Dickens and Shakespeare, and as I say, so many Gales Orsi. And I thought, well, those British are such a nice people, and they were nice.
British soldiers like Tom Dennis did all they could to help.
In fact, I must confess, we pinched some chocolates and biscuits and sweets and things from a magazine store by taking a roof sheet off and lowering a gunner inside it. And we had a 1500-weight truck, and we spread our largesse in the valley, so to speak, to the kids and the ladies. They were extremely nice people.
To the Big Three conference in the Crimea went not only the leaders of the three great Allied powers, but also the hopes and faith of all men who look to a future free from war.
At Yalta in February 1945, Churchill had agreed with Stalin to send back to the Soviet Union any Soviet citizens who fell into British hands, whether they wished to return to the Soviet Union or not. In exchange, Stalin promised to cooperate in the swift return of any British prisoners of war liberated by the Soviets. On the 13th of May 1945, Harold Macmillan, political advisor at Allied headquarters for the area, arrived in Klagenfurt for talks about the fate of the Cossacks. He wrote in his diary,
"Moreover, among the surrendered Germans are about 40,000 Cossacks and White Russians with their wives and children. To hand them over to the Russians is condemning them to slavery, torture, and probably death. To refuse is deeply to offend the Russians and incidentally break the Yalta Agreement. We have decided to hand them over."
Harold Macmillan would probably have discussed the Cossacks with Field Marshal Alexander, Supreme Allied Commander for the area. The Cossack problem was then dealt with by General Robertson, Alexander's deputy, who, just a day after Macmillan's visit to Klagenfurt, issued this order. Paragraph 1 says,
"All Russians should be handed over to Soviet forces at agreed point of contact established by you under local arrangement with Marshal Tolbukin's headquarters. Steps should be taken to ensure that Allied prisoners of war held in Russian area are transferred to us in exchange at same time."
This order was passed down to Lieutenant General Keatley, officer commanding 5 Corps. His right-hand man was a bright young officer who at 30 years of age was the second youngest brigadier in the army. His name was Toby Lowe, later to become Lord Aldington. He did not wish to be interviewed for this programme. 5 Corps headquarters were near Klagenfurt, on the banks of the Wörthersee at the Villa Angara. Of the hundreds of documents generated by British 5 Corps that spring, the ruling Brigadier Lowe signed after a meeting on May the 21st is arguably the most significant. This ruling, which was copied to Brigadier Lowe's superiors, classifies whole Cossack formations en bloc as Soviet nationals. It says,
"Following will be treated as Soviet nationals: Ataman Group, 15th Cossack Cavalry Corps, reserve units of Lieutenant General Shkuro, and Caucasians."
Amongst these Cossack formations were thousands of people who were not Soviet citizens, yet they are classified as eligible for repatriation. Brigadier Lowe, or Lord Aldington as he now is, maintains that this grouping by formation was only a guide, and that under the terms of his ruling some screening of these Cossacks could have been possible. But later orders issued by others at 5 Corps after Brigadier Lowe left Austria on the 22nd of May made it clear that all of the Cossacks were to go back, whether they were Soviet citizens or not, a fact which astonished some British officers.
I felt, like many other officers at the time, that there was something wrong. We couldn't understand why everybody en bloc had to go back, where I knew that a great number of these people in these camps had passports which prohibited them from going back to Russia.
Foreign passports?
Yes. Nansen passports. And a lot of them are displaced people. People who had never had any connection with Russia at all, had just fallen in under this sort of Cossack blanket when they sort of evacuated themselves from Russia. And as they came down through Yugoslavia, so very many people joined the column. And they had nothing to do with the fighting. They had nothing to do with Russia. Lots of them had never been in Russia. And I think that it was entirely wrong to sort of, that these people weren't segregated. Why everybody had to go back is beyond my comprehension.
On May the 28th, some of the Cossack officers were separated from their families by a trick. The British told them to prepare to travel to a special conference to discuss their fate. British officers swore on their honour that the Cossacks would return safely that night. Maria Platonov's uncle held a Yugoslav passport, and so should never have been repatriated to the Soviet Union.
And I said, where are you going? He said, well, Mary and my mother is Angelina. He said, I come to say goodbye because we are going now to the conference. And he just smiled. He said, oh, Mary, don't you worry, because you know what? We have a word of British officer. And they told us there is just a conference, and at supper time, I come back and I will tell you what it's all about. So we say goodbye, and then I saw him. He climbed it. You know, there was open truck. They were not covered. And he just saying, he waved to me, and he was gone. I never saw him again.
Maria's uncle, together with nearly 1,500 of his Cossack comrades, was taken to the nearby barracks at Spital. It was here that they were to learn they had been deceived. There was no conference. Instead, without screening of any sort, they were to be handed over en masse to the Soviet forces the next day. On hearing the news, they became desperate.
Many of them kept coming to me to ask me to shoot them, and ask me to, in fact, to fetch their wives and children and shoot them as well, rather than hand them over to the Russians. And right through the night, things began to happen, suicides. You hear the awful bumping and banging inside these big barrack huts. And then a couple of Cossacks would come out, dragging some poor creature who'd just taken his own life. And they laid them out on the grass bank just inside the wire, right against me. Some had, one in fact had hanged himself with some wire. Some had cut the throats with broken glass from the windows. It was mainly that type of thing. Some had slashed the wrists with glass, broken glass. I'd say it went on all through the night. I don't know how many. I wouldn't like to put a figure. It was so horrifying.
Next morning, the remaining Cossacks at first refused to get onto the trucks. One British sergeant major resolved to make them.
He then gave the order to use the pick hells and the rifle butts, etc. And they started, oh dear, they started bashing these poor devils. And I just yelled out an order to stop it. It was awful. And I think it was coincidental that the Cossacks then realised that they'd got to go anyway. And they reluctantly started to get up, and we loaded the first truck.
Night fell on the valley, and the Cossack officers did not come back from their conference, as the British had promised they would. Zoe Polanska was then 15 years old, and had wandered into the Cossack camp after a war in which she had been held in the German concentration camps of Auschwitz and Dachau. She remembers the atmosphere when the Cossack officers did not return.
They were crying, they were screaming. The children didn't know where to turn to. They've lost their fathers. Wives lost their husbands. They were left without nothing. I mean, once the husband went, that was it. And it was just a sheer panic. What's going to happen to the rest of us?
On the morning of June the 1st, those left in the camp held a prayer vigil, clustered around a makeshift altar. Troops of the 8th Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, commanded by Major Rusty Davis, came to the camp with orders to get everyone onto the trucks without checking whether they were Soviet citizens or not.
With rifles then and pick-helves, we advanced towards this column. By this time you can imagine the screams and the squeals and the children running around here, there and everywhere else were just absolute panic and beginning to get a bit horrific. And soldiers are trying to drag the odd child, the odd woman, the odd man into the trucks, and literally to throw them onto the trucks. And by this time there were mothers who had lost their children, children who lost their mothers. There were grandparents who had lost their children, and so the old and infirm, nevertheless everybody was going on board these trucks. There were people trying to throw themselves on the bayonets, there were people trying to shoot themselves. And one chap did rush forward, pressed the trigger of one rifle and blew the head of a chap. Next was standing alongside, he missed himself and the other chap. The crush was so intense that the whole thing went up like a pyramid. People just started scrambling all over each other. And eventually it just shot up with people just climbing over each other. We were frantic now because people were being trapped underneath this pyramid.
They tried to get the leaders first, and they tried to get to the altar. But we still kept singing the Lord's Prayer. And they keep pulling and tugging. And of course, each time they tug, I was lifted up in the crowd and down again, thrown into the crowd again. And of course, all I could see, some of the children's heads down underneath people's feet, tramping on them.
And then suddenly I saw, which is really most horrible for me, was there was an old man. And I don't know why, till now, I even still remember, he was bald. And he was on his knee. And he was terrified. And he was, and I remember so well because somehow the boots of the soldiers, there was the two soldiers, were dusty. I don't know, after 45 years, but I still remember that. And he was so desperate. He was kissing those boots and he said, please don't send me back, don't send me back. And they were hitting him on the head, methodically, without any expression on the face. I just look at them. I was so stunned. I said, is that true happening? And they hit him, and they hit him, and the blood was just streaming off his face, when, tear, and, the tears were coming with the blood. And then finally he lost consciousness, and then they took him by the hands and the arm, and they just, threw him in a truck.
People were on their knees, holding up documents to show they were not Soviet citizens. This French passport belonged to a man who was 17 at the time. The fact he could prove he was French made no difference.
They tried to throw us in the trucks. We tried to hide in the crowd. And all those that were on the edge of the crowd were taken by force and thrown into the trucks. There were some of them who, in trying to throw themselves off the trucks, fell onto the bayonets.
In the chaos, some managed to rush to the bridge across the River Drow, a river gorged with fast-flowing water from the nearby mountains.
By the bridge, it wasn't a very nice scene at all. I mean, it was a harrowing thing to have in your mind. Women and children were dropping into the water, into that water. And just like autumn leaves, instead of leaves, there were humans. But there's nothing we could do about it. The machine gun was running over us. And we were just probably lucky that the bullet didn't touch us. But because there were so many people dropping off the bridge into the water, and children, women and children, and some men, that was the reason why we managed to dart across without being clobbered.
Estimates of how many died that day vary from 100 to a handful. A few managed to escape in the chaos. Major Davis later initiated a rough screening and managed to save many of those who were unjustly destined for the Soviet Union. 80 miles away, driving up to another Cossack camp during these forced repatriations, was the chaplain to the 3rd Battalion, the Welsh Guards, the Reverend Malcolm Hart Richards.
There, behold, as I came to the crest of the hill, looking just across the valley, the other side, there was a sight always with a scenario out of a Wild West film. I should think about 3,000 horses grazing on the lovely green slopes with that background of forest trees. It was a most pleasing sight. And then not so pleasing, a little distance away, were improvised cages in which there were these Cossacks.
Ivan Kudrenko and his comrades were held in one of these cages. When ordered to get onto the trucks, they refused, saying they preferred to die by a British bullet rather than a Russian one. A British officer seemed willing to oblige them.
And then come the colonel and said, who want to be shot here, go to the left. And who want to go to the Soviet Union, go to the right. Most of us went to the left. We were standing there. Then maybe for a short time, very quick come the soldier, about 15 to 20 soldiers with the machine guns on front of us all, you know. Standing and aiming, you know. Aiming at us, you know. And we didn't move. Maybe about 15 minutes or so, arrived the flamethrowers. And they just lined it up on, just behind the barbed wire. They were flamethrowers, and they opened the fire on us with the flame. But the flame was over us, but the drops from the flames were our uniform burning, you know. When I turned back and I saw the ground, just a few seconds ago, the grass was green, but now was the black.
The official army record says the flamethrower was fired some distance away from the Cossacks.
And this ejection of a flame was momentarily. That's all it was, almost in a flash. But he would like a flamethrower just click you around. But there it is, we got them into the trucks.
In a process of hasty and arbitrary screening organised after the Cossack show of defiance, Ivan Kudrenko was saved by this passport, showing that his place of birth was Vanya in Yugoslavia. He was not a Soviet citizen. But some of his comrades who, like him, held foreign passports were refused screening. British forces also handed over to Stalin soldiers whom they knew were Germans. Just under 1,000 of the officers and NCOs of the 15th Cossack Cavalry Corps were German soldiers in German uniform. The Yalta Agreement dealt only with the return of Soviet citizens. So the way these Germans were treated is the clearest instance of injustice. And it was no accident the Germans were included in the return of the Cossacks to Stalin. A document issued by 5 Corps on the 24th of May says in the very definition,
throughout this letter, the term Cossacks is taken to mean those troops of Soviet nationality, including their camp followers and German cadre, who have fought with or cooperated with the enemy.
By this document, the Germans were treated as if they were Soviet nationals. The British misled some of these German officers about their fate, just as they had misled the others.
A British colonel said to me and some of my comrades, "Gentlemen, be very quiet. It will never happen that the English army, prisoners of war, which are taken by the English crown, will be handed over to a foreign power." And so we trusted this gentleman till the last moment.
The first Karl Vierkorn knew of the British plan to hand him and his colleagues over to the Russians was when the trucks rounded a curve in the road and he saw the boundary between the British and Soviet zones of Austria in front of him. marked by the bridge at Judenburg.
This is a bridge, and when I see it again, it's difficult to describe my feelings, because here over this bridge our way to Siberia started. At the 28th of May 1945, we were transported by the British Army in the hands of the Soviets, and a martyrium started which take for me nearly 9 years. The lorries of the English soldiers stopped at the bridge, and one after the other went over the bridge, turned over there, and our baggage was thrown down, and we also, and we were in the hands of the Soviet army. And I remember my first impression was when such of these Russian women shot with a pistol to a little dachshund which was belonging to one of my comrades. It was terrible. After 10 or 15 shots to this little dog, he died. And we were, of course, very, very enraged.
Then began a long and tortuous journey by land to Siberia. On arrival, the Germans were assessed for work in the mines and quarries.
The one was a little bit more stronger. He came, as I, for example, came in coal mines. And further, for the next 4 years, I worked in coal mines every day, 10 hours, and sometimes longer. And other comrades had to work in stone carriers. All together, very, very heavy work. And in these first 3-4 years, most of us died because the food was so less and so bad that they were so hungry, and one after the other was going out like a candle.
Karl Fierkorn suffered 9 years in Siberia. When he was released in 1954, he learnt that of the 1,000 Germans who had been handed over with him, only 240 now survived. No one knows how many of the others sent back by the British Army died in the labour camps or faced summary execution. But it's certain that several thousand of them were not Soviet citizens, and so under British government policy should never have been handed over to Stalin. It wasn't just the Cossacks who suffered because of the British. There were other surrendered enemy forces held in Austria in spring 1945 who were to be sent to an even worse fate. Collected into camps, many in these fields, were 26,000 Yugoslav soldiers and their families. These people were anti-communists who had fought, many alongside the Germans, against Marshal Tito and his communist partisans. The British had sided with the communist, Marshal Tito. There was a myriad of groups opposing Tito. All had fought against communism. All had in varying degrees been associated with the Germans. Though many of the various anti-Tito forces sided with the Germans simply because they hated Tito more than they hated the Nazis. Like the Cossacks, most of these anti-Tito Yugoslavs were at first glad to see the sight of a British uniform. Nina Lenček had fled across the mountains from Tito's partisans.
One of the soldiers was, I guess, Scottish, because he had that Scottish hat and compound, came and he gave me a biscuit. That was really, I found so kind of him, because I was absolutely starved, as everybody else was. And I guess they passed also to other people. We looked at them as our saviors.
One man in Yugoslavia wanted these people back, the one man they most feared. The Yalta Agreement did not apply to the anti-Tito Yugoslavs. Churchill's policy on their fate was clear. They should not be handed over to Marshal Tito. Yet despite all this, General Robertson, number 2 to Field Marshal Alexander, the Allied Supreme Commander for the area, wrote this in his order of the 14th of May.
All surrendered personnel of established Yugoslav nationality who were serving in German forces should be disarmed and handed over to local Yugoslav forces.
Thus the anti-Tito forces were to be handed over to Marshal Tito and his partisans, precisely what Churchill's policy said should not happen. The Robertson order was issued the day after Macmillan returned from Klagenfurt and had seen the extent of the problems facing Fife Corps. It was Brigadier Lowe who was asked to negotiate personally with Tito's representatives for the handover of those the British held. An order he signed on the 17th of May says,
all Yugoslav nationals at present in the Corps area will be handed over to Tito forces as soon as possible. These forces will be disarmed immediately, but will not be told of their destination.
Next day, Brigadier Lowe issued a clarification saying,
Yugoslav nationals will in this context comprise all non-Tito soldiers of Yugoslav nationality and such civilians of Yugoslav nationality as can be classed as their camp followers. The signal does not apply to other Yugoslav civilians other than camp followers.
A key part of Brigadier Lowe's order said the anti-Tito soldiers were not to be told where they were being sent. But some of the British troops who had to carry out the order were faced with a dilemma when suspicious anti-Tito soldiers demanded to know what their eventual destination would be.
We had to invent the lie that we were sending them to Italy. And we told them that all through those 10 days. And it was a matter of great agony, shame to us to betray these people in this way and to lie to them. But there was no alternative if we were to carry out the order that we were given to send them back to Tito.
An elaborate scheme was evolved to deceive the anti-Tito soldiers about where they were being sent. They were loaded into lorries and driven to the tiny station of Maria Elland, where they were told they would board the train to Italy and safety.